Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today, we're bringing you the show from Main Street in Tooele, Utah. You know, everybody, almost everybody, even a guy riding by on a motorcycle there, has heard the reference or identifies with living paycheck to paycheck. Most of us have spent some time in our life doing just that. You know how it goes. You got a budget. You know how much your paycheck's going to be. You spend so much on the rent, so much on the utilities, put aside a little for car repair, kids going to school, that sort of thing. It all works. But what happens when somebody that's a breadwinner loses their job? Well, what happens when that happens to a county and part of their revenue they depend on goes away? That's our topic today on the County Seat. We are going to be taking a look at the budgeting process, how counties anticipate their income, and we will discuss with one county what happens when a severe shortfall happens to their income and how they cope with it. First, let's find out a little bit about budgets.
Thanks, Chad. Budgeting. It works the same whether it's for your home, your business, or government. It's something that we all do every day to ensure that the money coming in balances with the money going out. However, when it comes to government budgeting, we're looking at a much broader scale.
Imagine balancing a checkbook, but instead of budgeting for groceries, you're budgeting for things like jail funding, building a road, or providing public health services.
Our role as a county is especially to provide those services that make the most sense, that cities and the state would not cover, and some of that is, of course, in unincorporated areas. We take care of that. Or in some of the major functions like administering elections or collecting the property tax revenues that are then distributed to the school districts and the municipalities. And in that sense, we play a very vital function.
The county also collects revenue to provide services to citizens like police and fire and run the day-to-day operation of the county. In order for all of them to work at any given time requires a plan.
We're required to always have a balanced budget. Also, we have to adopt a budget each year. But I think having a good structure, that requirement to have a balanced budget and having definite deadlines places us as counties in a great position to make sure that we don't back ourselves into a corner, that we address issues and situations now rather than just kick the can down the road.
Budgeting begins with the county auditor, who collects information from each of the county departments to come up with projected tax revenue and expenses.
Each of the departments has this dollar amount that they've been allotted, or their bucket of money. We then, during the month of September, ask the departments to then look at their budget as they build it for the next year and then make those adjustments. And as a county, it's important to look at our revenue streams, and if we look that certain activities or things are being funded primarily from revenue streams that could be endangered or have a volatile nature to them, then I think it's incumbent upon us as county officials to be aware of that and always have a contingency in place. But, you know, we don't have a crystal ball.
Utah County is one of many who have tried to stay on top of the changes that may come their way by highlighting federal revenue sources that the counties have relied on in the past.
In particular, once the sequester went into effect this past few months, we've gone ahead and asked departments to be very proactive, following up on their grants and asking if there will be reduction in funding.
An additional challenge for the rural counties is PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, a federal reimbursement to counties to compensate them for their inability to levy property tax on federal land.
It's a substantial revenue source in a number of counties that have a lot of the federal public lands, such as Tooele and Box Elder and San Juan. Some of the other counties that have less federal land, it's not as a larger portion. The amounts that are being discussed now in terms of reduction dealing with the federal sequester they're not huge, but I think they're in the 5% range. So they would be felt, but it wouldn't be crippling.
By law, a tentative budget must be released by the county before November, and the final budget is made available for public comment during the first week of December. However, most counties encourage public comment and involvement through the entire process.
They're welcome to come to the tentative budget adoption, which is always the last week of October. And then during November, there's opportunities to have input, but the actual public meeting where they can come and stand publicly and express concerns or ask questions is that public hearing, which is usually scheduled the first week of December each year.
Many of us know that it's difficult to stick to a budget, particularly when times are tough. But whether it's your home or the county courthouse, the ultimate payoff to sticking to that budget is peace of mind. For the county seat, I'm Rhea Rossi.
Thank you, Rhea, for the basics on budgeting. We appreciate the report. When we come back, we're going to find out the difference between the theory and how hard it is to actually apply, manage budgets, and handle county finances when it's on the ground. We will be back with more of the county seat with our guests in just a minute.
Rediscover your sense of adventure. Welcome to San Juan County. Discover the past. A change of place. Utah's San Juan County, where life is elevated.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, SITLA, manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of providing financial support to further the education of Utah's students, while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, the School Land Trust Program will distribute nearly $37 million to Utah schools this year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
Unlimited opportunity for adventure. It's all about knowing where to look. ATV adventures, rock crawling events, art festivals, and wildlife events. The opportunities are limitless. Pick your adventure in Millard County.
Welcome back to the county seat. We've been talking today about budgeting, and of course, it's real easy to sit at the armchair and say, oh yeah, well, I would budget this way and handle problem that way. But when you actually get your sleeves rolled up in the middle of county budgeting, there are so many variables it becomes very difficult. No better example of that than the challenges that have been facing Tooele County here in Utah. So we thought we would go right to the experts from the trenches for today's discussion. Joining us for our discussion is the Tooele County Treasurer, Jeremy Walker. Thank you for joining us today. Commissioner Bruce Clegg from Tooele County and Commissioner Sean Milne, also from the county. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to join us here and you know, kind of wade through a really difficult process. Probably as difficult to talk about it as it is to even figure out. So I actually want to start with you, Jeremy, and ask you a little bit about the saga of where Tooele County's come. We've all read from the metro papers and papers around the state that it's kind of a challenging time out here, and people are probably going, oh, well, could have seen that. What kind of happened? What elements led to this mix?
Well, we're kind of calling it the perfect storm. In 2012, we experienced a combination of things that have put us in a very difficult situation. The first thing we had in 2012 was the ending of the Deseret Chemical Depot, burning of that waste, which we were compensated for from the federal government. Also in that year, we brought on our new county jail facility, which was an additional $2.5 million, both in debt service and operating costs. And then we had an unexpected shortfall in mitigation fees from waste industry in the West Desert. So the combination of those two actually created about a $2 million fund deficit in the fund balance, which we had to take in 2012 and we had to prepare for again in 2013.
Was there a lot of notice from Deseret Chemical that the ending was coming to that, or you know, had that been something that was on the clock?
Absolutely, and it's something that had been up in front. Jobs had been lost building up to that as different parts of that project were completed. Certain jobs were lost, and it certainly was on the clock and on the schedule. It really was the West Desert mitigation fees that caught us by surprise and created essentially the loss there was what our budget shortfall became in 2012.
How did you respond when you saw these numbers falling? What were the steps the commission went through as they saw this coming along?
When we got this latest news, we went into a round of layoffs, and then we prepared in the fall to raise property taxes about $100 per family to help mitigate this, and then again this spring we've had to have more layoffs.
When I hear an increase of about $100 per family, that doesn't strike me as very big, but boy, if I'd have read the paper, it sounded like the world was coming to an end out here. How do Tooele County's property taxes line up with some of the other rural counties around the state?
We haven't raised property taxes in Tooele County for 25 years because we haven't needed to, and so we've been the lowest, and where it says it's gone up 82%, the 82% is just the 10% of the property tax.
In people's minds, they hear an 82% tax increase and they're thinking, well, you're almost doubling my taxes, you're almost doubling the county revenue. What's your answer to that when they say it?
My first answer is I understand where they're coming from. And when it was proposed before I came into office that there was going to be an 82% property tax increase for the county, I thought, wow, that's crazy in this kind of an economy to impose on our citizens. So I understand where the angst is. What I've come to learn, though, is it's not 82% of our total tax bill. In Tooele County, roughly 70% of the taxes go to the school district alone. And in our county, about 10% of our property tax bill comes to Tooele County. The 82% proposed property tax increase is on that 10%, not the total property tax bill. So while I'm still cringing at the thought of being one of those guys that's here to say, in light of our financial situation, yes, we need a tax increase, and I cringe about that, the reality of it is for the average household in Tooele County, it'll be about $88 a year in additional taxes, because it's 82% of that 10% of the total bill. That comes just to Tooele County government.
Even if we get this tax increase, which we hope to get, we'll still be the fourth lowest in Utah.
We'll be back with the county seat in just a minute.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
If you haven't been to Starvation in a while, you're in for a great surprise. New campsites, new cabins, and beach improvements await your next visit. Just 3 hours away, but a world away from the Wasatch Front in Duchesne County. Starvation State Park is located 4 miles northwest of Duchesne, just off US Highway 40. Duchesne County. Close enough for business, far enough to get away.
Let's be honest, you don't know much about Beaver County. Well, let me tell you about it. It's the birthplace of outlaw Butch Cassidy and inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. Some of the best skiing in Utah is at Eagle Point. You've got camping, Canyon Breeze Golf Course, Crusher and the Tushers, Beaver Territorial Courthouse, snowmobiling, renewable energy, Pioneer Car Show, Squeaky Cheese, ghost towns to explore, best water in the country, Paiute ATV trails, Old Frisco Kilns, horse racing, hunting, fishing, and it's a good place to live. Beaver County, mountains of fun. I could tell you more, but why don't you come and see it for yourself?
Carbon County is typically known for its industry and coal production, but that is not all. Utah's Castle Country has something for everyone. It is the home of the nationally recognized North Springs Shooting Range, North Springs provides gun hobbyists and professionals a practice and training facility that is second to none. Visit castlecountry.com for more information.
Welcome back to the county seat. We've been talking about county budgets, how difficult it can actually be when you're in the process of making budgets and having to monitor them. Just before we went to the break, a thought occurred to me, because you are a new commissioner.
Correct.
And this problem had already come to the surface, and you've been thrust into a bit of a learning curve. So my question is...
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. My question for you, though, Sean, is how different is your perspective of how difficult this actually is now versus when you were a candidate or even before you were a candidate?
Part of the reason I ran is I foresaw that the budget situation was a difficult one that Tooele County was in, and that something would have to change going forward in order to create a more solvent and a solid footing for the county. And even then, I didn't have the total perspective that you say, as of now, being on the other side of the fence, that I can appreciate today. As a matter of fact, I won't forget the day in February of this year that came to light for me. And it was kind of a gut check moment. The learning curve has been rather steep, and the decisions are pretty grave.
How much of a misperception about the actions of commissioners does the public have? I mean, I know there's a huge gap between what really happens on the inside and what happens as you're sitting back, as I said earlier, in the armchair.
In order for government to work well, our citizens need to be involved. They need to be engaged, and they need to be well informed in order to make good decisions at the ballot box. But what do they do in between that time is just as important. And I know that it's been very important to me, and I've emphasized it in our public meetings, that I appreciate the increasing numbers that we're seeing at each subsequent county commission meeting that we're having. We fairly early on this year moved them from the 3 o'clock time that we were having them to 7 o'clock to encourage greater communication and participation by our citizens. We recognize that oftentimes there's a disconnect, just generally speaking, between government and our citizens, and the more informed that they can be, the better off they can understand how we get to some of the decisions we make, and there's less distrust. And certainly just nationally, look at the situation, there's a lot of distrust with elected leaders. So I openly invite folks to come to our meeting. They would have found at this last one that we had, Treasurer Walker gave quite a good presentation to say graphically on a PowerPoint presentation where we are today, how we got here, and what our plan is to get out of the situation we find ourselves in. Likewise, if folks come to those meetings, if they can, or if they check out the information on our county website, they'd be able to find that information that would hopefully break down that barrier, that misperception of decisions made apart from them in mind, and see that really we're doing the best that we can with the information we're provided, and are not looking to hide anything.
I would like to shift gears here a little bit, though, and talk about some of the things that aren't on the table really as a part of a daily discussion, but really should be part of a discussion. I'm sitting here looking over a chart that has got information about PILT, which is the federal government's payment in lieu of taxes. And I look across here at Tooele County as an example, and the valuation for property tax of the federally owned property, that would be Forest Service, BLM, federal properties in your state, is like $11 million a year. And yet the payment in lieu of taxes, which are, because of sequestration, even further being cut, only comes up to 3.1. I mean, there's what, $8.5 million difference. You know, in the long range, is that crippling the counties with that kind of underpaid burden or inability to generate a fair tax across the state?
Sure, long term, I think it is. You take that kind of dollar amount away from our operating budget, and it makes it difficult to provide services to the same kind of land. As you noted, sequestration has taken a further hit to that this year, and that concerns us greatly. PILT as a whole is 15% of our general fund for this year alone.
It hurts us and the school board, and we've been told that it could hit us between $250,000 or $75,000, depending on what we actually get assessed when it comes out. But it could be a big hit to our county. built.
Do you think that are other areas of a broader portfolio of private industry potential if we could get the use of federal lands loosened up a little bit out here?
We certainly do. That'd be our hope, and we have a harder problem than most, because with Deseret Chemical and Tooele Army Depot and we got our bombing range and Dugway has 850,000 acres tied up, and that's not BLM or forest, that's just other federal property. So we've got a lot of federal ground tied up in Utah that it's hard for us to make revenue out of.
You know, every time that there's an acre that's in some government entity's hands and they're not paying property taxes on it, that's very difficult. Obviously, the more that could be in private hands, the better and more innovative perhaps those property owners could be to make profit for themselves, and at the same time we'd be able to assess private property taxes.
I actually believe, Jeremy, this was part of your presentation. It's kind of an interesting little chart to look at that shows in the dark color how much is actually private property within Tooele County, and the white shows how much of it's actually government controlled, and you don't have any ability to generate property tax on any of that.
Correct.
And that's one of our key points to our long-term plan, is realizing that is the reality for now. Certainly we're going to continue as a county to participate in the legislative processes to try to change that the best we can. But we do realize that you mentioned which we would prefer, and actually our plan is that we're going to try to be as diversified as possible. Economic development is the ideal way to diversify, but because the economy that we have locally and the natural resources that we have locally, we're limited to those things, and so we're just going to diversify the best we can through our plan.
A great segue for us to take a break, because when we come back I would like to talk about your game plan and see how you guys have built your way forward from here. I think it'll be a great lesson in planning for other counties as well as you at home. We'll be right back with the county seat here in Tooele County.
Believe it or not, summer isn't far away, and neither is Juab County. There's no need to travel far to find the perfect family adventure. Boating Yuba Reservoir, exploring Mount Nebo, riding Little Sahara. Save your gas this summer and stay in your own backyard. Juab County. It'll change your family forever.
Along Interstate 70 and Highway 89 is an area that is rich with high mountain peaks, vast forests, lakes, streams, historical sites, and a climate that is perfect for outdoor adventures, no matter what the season. You will be greeted by local residents with a smile and a welcoming hand. In the center of it all, Sevier County.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City, Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit ScenicSouthernUtah.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic Southern Utah.
Welcome back to the county seat. We've had a very revealing half hour talking about the realities of county budgeting and how certain things can all of a sudden, like a 2x4, hit a county over the side of the head, and they've got to make some really difficult decisions. And I've got to commend the officials from Tooele County, because this would be something that would be just easier not to talk about. And they've been very gracious about coming here and very candidly talking about some of these difficult issues. There are a lot of factors here. I mean, there have been layoffs. The county employees had to talk about retirement, and you had to raise taxes. What's the toughest part? What was the toughest part to challenge?
By far, everything is just decisions until you come down to the layoffs. And in a small town, it's all your lifelong friends and family members and stuff that you have to lay off. And by far, it's the layoffs that is the hardest part of this budget.
So once again, we find ourselves at the perfect segue. We've got about a minute left. Could you outline what the game plan is? I'm sure people in Tooele County that haven't been following this closely would be real interested, but I think people across the state would like to know how you're going to fix it.
Well, we came into early 2013 with a budget, but it included some tax increases. The problem that we ran into is that we actually anticipated before we got to receiving those new tax revenues that we wouldn't have any cash left, and so it was actually a cash crunch that created the panic. And so we had to go into some very intense and thorough meetings where unfortunately we had to do some reductions in force and people lost their jobs. And in fact, that happened at the end of our 2012 budget as well. So over the last 18 months, we've actually decreased our employee count by 25%, as well as our general fund budget. So it's been a reduction in the level of service. It's been the elimination of some services completely. And we haven't quite adopted that budget yet because the time frame for those people to announce their retirements is not yet there. But we anticipate that we'll have significant cuts to the budget and an amendment to this year's budget, and that it will create a surplus, and it will start us being able to rebuild the rainy day fund, as people call it, and get us back on a healthy standing.
What kind of things are you going to take to try and improve that tax base? You know, what can you do?
The things that are in the commissioners and the county's control per se is the property tax is something that they do have complete control of. Sales tax rates are somewhat controllable, but what is completely controllable is the level of spending. And unfortunately, that's where the big cuts have come. They've proposed the tax increase, but the thing that they had ultimate control over, the spending, that's where they took control. And our short-term plan, which was early this year and through the rest of this year, was to make those cuts.
When will some of the pain start reversing itself?
I think that's the stage that we're kind of at right now. You know, we've had round after round of layoff with an eye focused towards correcting our path. Our situation's a lot like an aircraft carrier. You don't exactly turn that ship on a dime when you're heading down a certain path, and so it's been a long time coming.
The way we cut expenses ultimately is the layoffs we've had, and we feel like the layoffs, all the layoffs we're going to have, we have had. And so we'll just move forward from here and try to provide what services we can with what people we have left.
And we'll correct that aircraft carrier turn and get us headed in that more positive direction.
Thank you for joining us on the County Seat. You know, this stuff's really important. County life is where your daily life happens. Get involved. Pay attention to this. Check us out on our website. We'd love to hear your comments on Facebook as well. TheCountySeat.tv. We'll look for you next week.